Don't make me crap on the floor.
Ben Kuchera, you ready to dig into the extended universe, I guess you could call it, of the Borderlands franchise?
We're going to take a deep dive into the very lore of Borderlands, because this exists, apparently.
Is it canonical, or is this a what-if situation?
I believe this is all canonical.
Wow. The implications are very far-ranging. We're taking a look at Tales from the Borderlands, the very first episode of the new series from Telltale. You probably figured out that it was a Telltale game just by looking at it with your eyes and seeing the art style. I'm not sure how you would classify that. This is the first episode, Zero Sum, which you very recently reviewed for Polygon.com. Dropped. I think it's very safe to say that it's sort of stealth dropped. I think a lot of people were surprised that this actually came out this week. But it is out now, and I've been playing a little bit of it. You obviously finished the first chapter. And I don't know, I found it actually pretty interesting. This is not Telltale's first time at the rodeo, obviously, but I think it's worth, taking a look at it, because it is the first time that they have done it for another video game franchise and not like an established, comic book or more, general entertainment property.
Yeah, it's a really surprising move, and I think in a lot of ways it really gave them like an opportunity to do something a little bit funnier and a little bit more out there. Like, yeah. I felt as I played it that everyone involved had a lot of fun putting it together. Yeah, and it really comes through.
I think that's safe to say, and it's surprising whenever you hear about developers working together under any circumstances. But this is like to so thoroughly trust them with their baby like this is I don't know. It's really surprising. There we just saw this is one of the main characters that you can play as, Reese, who has access to, in this scene, a loader bot that you can actually like equip. You can like customize their loadout, which is a weird sort of action game thing. I mean, obviously it's not a very deep progression system or anything like that, but there's a lot of really like neat stuff like that where they don't just sort of lift the look and feel of Borderlands. They actually sort of mimic the like user interface and mechanics of Borderlands, which I actually thought was kind of interesting. I'm not a diehard Borderlands fan, and even I was catching, elements like that left and right. They're pretty heavy-handed with that stuff.
Yeah, there are scenes where the characters like actually get loot and like talk about it in character. It's so strange, but it works for the property. I mean, yeah, it works really well.
So this is like the very, I think this is probably one of the more divisive things about Telltale's games is when they attempt these action sequences, which basically boil down to quick time events and stuff like that. And I remember that was like something that they struggled discussing when talking about Tales for the Borderlands, because obviously it is like an action franchise, and are you guys just going to do another game where you can decide conversation and then you point at targets and squeeze the right trigger, and that is your take on action? And I mean, so far that is basically exactly what it is. That stuff has never really bothered me, because it's just another way of interacting with a game. It is like obviously far more violent than the Walking Dead games were, which I think is saying something since those were already pretty graphic.
Yeah, it has the tone of the Borderlands series, where it got that psychotic, kind of hyper real, violent tone, but it never feels dangerous. Yeah. Like it's very clear the stakes are kind of low. It's way more fun and meant to be funny, if we can say that about graphic violence. It almost slapstick in a way. I think
slapstick's probably. I mean, horror slapstick, gory slapstick. The stick is covered in viscera. It's a nightmare. Do you find yourself getting like fatigued by sort of the Telltale model? Because I mean, this and the Wolf Among Us and The Walking Dead are so mechanically almost identical. I think it's safe to say. I mean, there is some a few differences here and there, but for the most part, like, you have scenes where you walk around, looking at and interacting with objects, and then you have scenes where you have to do quick time action events, and then you have, the 4-way conversation trees. Like, I don't know. They're so similar, and I don't know. I don't feel like it's just becoming repetitive at this point. But I'm curious to hear what you think about their sort of model.
I think for Tales from the Borderlands, the real draw is the characters and the writing.
Right.
I mean, it's even like these two characters that you play as are telling their story to a third party at the beginning of the game, which is a really interesting choice for Telltale because you know going in that neither of them are going to die.
Right.
That's a way of telling the player you're actually safe, at least for this episode.
That's the Telltale like bread and butter of
right. Anyone can die at any time.
Anyone will they will probably die. They're like they're the Joss Whedon of game developers.
And if you think about it, we wouldn't tolerate what Telltale does from like any other company, right?
It's true,
like
yeah.
They keep releasing games that are the same kind of level of graphical polish, using the same engine with like no major updates to the gameplay, and I don't have a single complaint about it.
I think that's what I was getting at. It's really fascinating that this combination, this engine that they've come up with, is so versatile. Like it really is a storytelling engine, right? It is maybe like the closest video game equivalent of like a choose your own adventure book, where it's less of an engine and it feels more like a structure. And I don't know how they pulled that off, but I think they have, which is really fortunate because obviously they're gonna use it for a long time for a lot of different properties. They got Game of Thrones supposedly coming before the end of the year. I don't know. It's kind of I honestly, it's wizardry. I don't know how they pulled that off.
Right, like you hear people talking about Far Cry 4, which is a game I really like, but it's like, it's kind of a prettier Far Cry 3, and you kind of ding it a little bit for that, right? It's like, where's the big advance, even though they did all this stuff to the engine? And then when people talk about Telltale games, they never say that. They're like, wouldn't it be great if they did like The Rocketeer? Like, I would love to play a Telltale game in whatever your favorite world is.
Right.
People are happy that it's the same thing, and they just want more of it.
I think it helps that a lot of the mechanics are so bare bones, like they just really stay out of the way. Like when I think about my time with the 2 seasons of the Walking Dead games, which are Walking Dead Season 1 was like my favorite thing that came out that year in all games. Like I harbor a lot of really fond memories of this game franchise, and it's not because of the scenes where zombies attack and like the shooting is just so tight. Like, oh man, it's because of the storytelling, and I think it helps that just sort of the systems stay out of the way of the storytelling. The real meat of it is when you make the decisions and seeing how those have implications throughout the rest of the time that you play the game, and comparing your decisions with the decisions your friends made, and that is something that I think has a lot of will have a pretty long lifespan. It can be used for all sorts of different franchises.
And there's so much fun to play with other people and like argue about these decisions. You have like 10 seconds to make. You know.
I play through it with my wife, who doesn't play a whole lot of video games. She made all of the decisions. And I shot all of the zombies. So arguably she had the better job because the zombie shooting, or mutant shooting, or whatever, depending on what game you're playing on.
And it's also 3 hours long or so. And I think that's the perfect amount of time. You sit down and you play an episode like it's a movie.
Yeah.
And I think that works so well for so many people.
Yeah. And I found myself getting surprisingly drawn in to these characters and their plight, despite the fact that I've never been like a huge Borderlands fan. Like, I don't know. I found it. Maybe it's just because like this is a better vessel for storytelling and world development than the Borderlands games are. Not through any fault of Borderlands, except that when I'm playing Borderlands, I'm just on that loot grind because that's what I'm all about is getting them purples and shit.
Now there's like characters, right?
Now there's obviously there were memorable characters throughout the Borderlands games, but I don't know.
The game actually seems to balance its tone really well and being like way over the top and crazy, and then there's some moments of like actual like pathos.
Yeah.
Like it's not afraid to juggle and go a little bit deeper into it.
Yeah, and then stuff like this happens. Anyway, this is Tales from the Borderlands. Episode 1, Zero Sum. It got me into it, man. Like I obviously a first episode of an episodic game needs to really deliver, and I think this one did.
Yeah, and it's so hard to like review these things and score them because like I don't know how much of this stuff is going to pay out.
Yeah, and
off later.
Yeah, it could be booyah. God, this game is so dumb. It could be like season 2 of Walking Dead, where there were some fairly weak episodes mixed in with some pretty strong episodes. But I guess time will tell. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll probably be back next week. Enjoy the Thanksgiving break.